What a crazy year it's been for all of us. It feels like ever since 2020 started, it feels like something had to break. Every single month, something just had to break, and there was just more on our plate month by month. Currently, right now, it's June, and so far, let's see what has happened so far. I don't mean to bring more negativity. I'm sure if you've been existing in the world for the past, half a month or even a day, you would know the kind of insanity that took place in 2020. Honestly, I feel like this year is everybody jokes about it, everybody puts memes about it, but I think this year is gonna really change the face of the earth more so into the future than it ever has. It's not like we're gonna recover out of 2020 and we're gonna go back to normal. It's like 2020 is a turning point where there's no more going back to normal like you knew it. There's no more the previous world anymore. We're moving forward to a new kind of world. One where a lot of the violence that takes place between people and all these kinds of craziness that I'll get into a little bit later, like these kinds of things won't happen. I hope things like all this police brutality, all this racism that has been existing for years, I hope the new future that we start 2021 and moving forward with this kind of stuff really just stopped. Okay, I saw an interesting tweet where everybody likes to think that 2020 is gonna be like it's disastrous. It's like everybody wishes it didn't happen. But a really interesting way to look at 2020 I've seen in a tweet or somewhere, and they're like 2020 wasn't or isn't a bad thing, but rather 2020 is the year that forces us to change. And I really reflected on that because it's true, because we've had these kinds of things happen before. We've had the Ebola outbreak before. We've had violence and police brutality before. We've had racism occur in broad daylight before. But the thing is, when everything's calm, everything is okay. Like no major change has been taken effect. Like what happens? Like people tweet about it for 2 days. Everybody's like, oh, this and that for 3 days. And then on the next week, we forget about it and move on to our usual lives. We lived in a way where we didn't acknowledge these things. But this year, oh, no. This year, it's going to change. It's enough is enough kind of thing. This year is going to force us to change. With the tragic death of Kobe, with the insanity that is a pandemic, the wildfires that swept across Australia, and I'm sure there's a lot more to count than just these things, but this is just what's coming up on the top of my head right now. And recently, the rioting and the entire social chaos that has been taking place because of George Floyd's murder, because of a police officer. Like we all know these things, and it really opened my eyes to really see the insanity that is 2020, but rather the fact that as much as you may say 2020 is a pain, as much as you may want to go back to your regular life, as much as you may want to act like this never existed, the fact of the matter is change is going to happen, and change is going to happen now. Because before we had opportunity to change, but nobody listened. We all tweet about it, and then we move back to it. We move back to our crazy lives, and nothing ever came out of it. Year after year. It's been a wild ride for me too, as I can imagine it's been for you if you've been directly affected, whether through the rioting, whether through the looting, whether you've been directly affected by the virus that's been going around. I'm so sorry if anybody has lost a loved one, and I'm so sorry if you were the one who lost yourselves amongst all this insanity. But it's time to it's time to reflect on a bit. Instead of having so much to do with, hey, this is going on or that's going on. And we've been really reacting, or rather, I've been really seeing how all the news affects me. I think it's important, especially right now where things are somewhat calmer. Maybe, who knows? And then maybe next week, 2020 breaks again. But I'm saying it's a good point of reflection, good point of coming back within yourself. What has happened in this year, and why do you say it's bad? Personally, from the Self Betterment Project aspect, I always talk about growth. I always talk about changing. And the thing is, change requires an event, like something that will rattle and shake your world, quite literally, perhaps. Because without it, I don't think people are capable as much. I think people are capable. I just don't think people exercise their strength to change or to fix something. When things are fine and dandy, something goes wrong, you'll be like, hey, no, whatever. And then you're gonna get lazy again. And then you go back to your old life. Personally, I have seen a lot of people be affected by COVID-19 or the entire rioting. It really opened my eyes to all the craziness that's been going on. And it only fuels the internal talk of, yeah, things are breaking apart. But here's how you could look at this. You could, one, look at this in a victim mentality kind of way. You could always look at this as like something tragic that happened, which it is. It is tragic. It is more so than a tragedy. It's wrong. Everything that's happened in 2020. It's an unfortunate event because of the virus. It's more than tragic and wrong of police brutality, the forest fires. You can always look at these things like, oh man, the world is really falling apart. And I can't go out anymore, or, I can't go back to my regular life. And all of those things are true. Or you could look at this in a way to understand, like, yeah, okay, things aren't easy. And I'm sure, who knows, maybe 2020 throws more curveballs at us. Maybe things could get a lot harsher. I'm not saying I want it to, but I'm saying all this hardship, you could look at it as a way of transformation. Even if you don't change the entirety of the physical world around you, at least look at this in a positive point and know that you have to fight through it. You have to really hunker down and really put in the work, really understand, like, yeah, this is not happy. I'm not in a good place. And that's okay. Because acknowledging the hardship should serve as a reference point that will help you power through all the things that should have been changed years ago. A lot of these riots right now shouldn't be happening because these kinds of things should have been fixed years ago. All of this racism should have been fixed years ago. You can even bring this internally and say a lot of the things you wanted to grow, you wanted to change within yourself, those changes should have been done years ago. I'm sure you can find something in yourself, say you wanted to do, and you just never accomplished it. I know personally, I have a lot of these moments. I'll have a lot of these things that should have been done years ago. And on that note, actually, going back to the insanity, I know there's a lot you can do. You can donate, you can support each other or somebody that you know that is struggling. You can, and even if you can't do those things, you can always bring it to yourself. And it's not selfish to think like, if I see this year as a point of the earth to change, then what that means. It means that we as individuals have to change, because the earth doesn't, the world doesn't magically change. The world is made up of people. It's made up of you guys. It's made up of all of us. So if you look at this point, if you can't, like maybe if all the rioting and insanity that's taking place outside doesn't necessarily affect you directly, if you're not sick, if you're not going hungry, things like this. If it doesn't affect you, it's not like, oh man, the world just sucks and I can't wait back to just go outside and go back on to my dumb shit, acting like I'm gonna start doing things better. Things should have been done years ago, and the world needs to change. This is the point, to change the world. But a lot of the times we forget that the world is just made out of us. Okay? Without us, you don't know if the world is good or bad, right? Nothing matters because none of us are there. But if you look at it in an individual perspective and be like, oh, Adnan, all this is going on. How are you going to tell us? Like, how are we even supposed to feel like we should push forward with our goals throughout all this kind of insanity? Now, I'm not saying that's selfish. I'm not saying that. The fact of the matter is, you make up the world. So doesn't that mean if you could finally start becoming better and pushing through with your ideas and goals to internally grow yourself, it would make, well, the world a better place, for a lack of a better word. There's a lot of things that has gone wrong, or to some people that has gone right. Maybe this is what we needed to change, because nothing changed before. Yeah, things were peaceful, but like without pain, without chaos, growth never occurs in an individual perspective. And who knows, maybe this can be applied to the world as well. This is a year of change. That's what I've realized. This is a year where every day you wake up and the world will look back at you and be like, hey, things are falling apart. Either you whine and cry about it, or you realize that you have to rise up and deal with it. Not just deal with it. Change it. Change all this insanity. Change the racism that should have been done years ago. Change yourself. That should have been done years ago. Things that you've been trying, personally, that I've been trying, that should have been accomplished or done years ago. Years ago. Years ago. And here we are. And we don't know what's gonna come in the future. We don't know if 2020 is gonna be worse than 2020. We don't know if 2021 is gonna be worse than this year. Are you expecting me to believe that just because a calendar year passed, maybe next year is somehow magically gonna be better? The world doesn't, as much as it looks like it, reality doesn't really work around a calendar year, right? Who knows? Maybe 2020 could be even worse. God forbid. I don't want it to be. I want to go back to things being normal. But at the end of the day, when things get rough, when things get tough, the tough get going. And if you've been sitting around and just seeing all this negative news in a way where it's just, you're just sitting there and be like, oh, life is happening to me, instead of rising up and changing. Maybe you're taking more of a proactive step in educating yourself, at the very least, about all this insanity that's been going on, whether it be just COVID, whether it be the forest fires that happen, whether it be the racism and police brutality that has been going on. At least educating yourself around the world, instead of just hearing it on Twitter and being like, oh, that's it. Or even donating. Or even actively trying to help if you're actually there in the protest, trying to make a change. Or you could be just changing yourself. Think back to all the things that you said you were gonna do. Just do it. When things get tough, you have to look at it in a positive way. And there's always two ways to look at it. You could be the victim, or you could rise up and make the change necessary. It's been a long year for all of us. And I know that a lot of us has been down. A lot of us has been feeling really low, lacking motivation. A lot of people have been wondering, maybe, maybe 2020 is actually 2012. Maybe the Mayan calendar was a little wrong. And maybe this year is it, you know what I mean? There's a lot of negativity to go around. And the way to grow from it is not to just say the negativity doesn't exist, or, act like you're going to take the mess in your room and shove it under your bed and act like the mess is gone. That's not how you deal with things. You have to acknowledge it. You have to see it for what it is. And then from there, build on it. From there, build on the situation, build on the knowledge, build on your plans, create a plan, build on yourself, build on a motivation, or at least at the very minimum, just find a sense of happiness within yourself that doesn't come from ignorance. A sense of satisfaction, a sense of accomplishment. These two things doesn't necessarily need to be like, oh, I'm like happy because I've been sleeping at home and imagining like the world isn't falling apart. Like, that's not the happiness I'm talking about. Something that you can genuinely see at the world, genuinely see in yourself, and at least bring something positive out of it. At the very least, you may not be into self-development like I am. You may not be into the protests like everybody else is. You may not be into donating either. But at the very least, the very, very bottom, what you could do is at least, instead of being negative, hearing all this negativity, instead of believing you're a victim, at least just a tiny bit. I'm not going to say be happy, because that's not something people can do overnight, or it's not consciously thought, but at least be satisfied with something. You see something, or be in a state of achievement, or be happy in a way where you can acknowledge what's happening, but you can acknowledge the growth. Happiness doesn't mean there's no sadness involved. Happiness doesn't mean the world has to be eradicated of all the horrific nightmares. Happiness is knowing what's going wrong, but also knowing what's going right. And I think a lot of people forget that. A lot of people forget that. Don't be so negative if you find yourself being. Don't be so reactively sad when you see the news. Like, oh, things are never going to get better. Or say things like, oh, maybe things aren't going to get back to normal. Maybe we'll never get back to the way I used to go outside and eat chips. Yeah, that's okay. Things aren't going to go back to how it was. And that's what change is. Change, it doesn't mean you're going to become the same guy you were yesterday. Right? Change means it's different. Right? You're going to grow. That's what growth and change is. So living your life, imagining like, oh, maybe we'll go back to 2016, how life was. It won't be. But that doesn't mean the new coming years will be worse. It doesn't mean what's happening is necessarily, the changes that are happening is necessarily going to be bad. It's like a whole new canvas. It's a whole new painting. And this time we've been shocked so hard that at least I hope that this time we can paint a better picture than last time. Without the insanity of police brutality, without the racism, without the lack of care for one another. Or at least within yourselves, paint a new picture for yourself where at least you can be happy and satisfied. Or a little better than before. Don't paint the same picture, because you will never get the same picture ever again. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with change or growth. It's sad that we may never go back exactly to where we were. But the new future, as different it may be a little different pictures with a newer color. Maybe you may not like it at the beginning, but hey, nobody said it was bad. You may hate it at first, but hatred of wanting to go back, like hating what's going to happen and the changes and wanting to go back to a previous state, that'll never bring you happiness, because we can't go back in time. Paint a better picture for yourself this time around. It's not going to involve the same colors. It may not even be the same picture. But that doesn't mean it's bad. Things that should have been changed years ago. Make that change. And I promise you, you'll be happier later on.